Welcome to Weird Games and Weirder People, a podcast about role-playing games and the weird, wonderful people behind them. Hello, weirdos! This is Diogo Nogueira, and today we're gonna listen to a chat I have with Ahimsa Kerp. Ahimsa is author of RPGs and fictions, and he publishes things through Night Owl Publishing. And you have probably seen his stuff like the zines Old School, some settings he worked on those amazing weird settings for old school extensions like Mythilandia, and has published a Deluge, which is like a sea adventure setting, and has worked on a lot of fiction writing too, when we talked about how those relate to each other and about the weird stuff we like, weird stuff we believe or don't believe or wish it was true. This is the first episode I ever recorded for a podcast, so I was quite nervous and it's quite fast. I forgot to ask some follow-up questions. I was too focusing on following the script, but it's quite fun. We talked about very interesting stuff and maybe how we could work on those things for our games in the future. So I hope you enjoy it, and let's get weird. Okay, I will try to do the intro.
Okay.
Hello, weirdos! Welcome to Weird Games and Weirder. Sorry. Hello, weirdos! Welcome to Weird Games and Weirder People, a podcast about role-playing games and the wonderful people behind them. My name is Diogo Nogueira, and today we have with us Ahimsa Kerp, who is tabletop author of indie RPG zines in the OSR, like Old School, and Deluge, and is on Night Owl Publishing, and who is also a fiction writer, author, and we're really glad to have him here. So, Ahimsa, can you tell us a bit about yourself and what you think about when we talk about weird and weirdness?
Yeah. Thanks for having me on, Diogo. I'm definitely a weirder person. I'm excited to be here. And I think about weird a lot because I think as a writer, my stuff often gets labeled weird. Lowercase w, there's sort of big case W that goes back to Lovecraft and Clark Ashton Smith, and nowadays is maybe China Meeville and the new weird, I guess they call it. And if you lean into your weirdness, then it's a feature. But if it's just weird, then it's a matter of, are you meeting the expectations of the reader or of the game player? So for me, I never try to make anything weird, but I do like to draw from a wide variety of sources. So I think my stuff looks pretty weird because I'm not really as content to sort of just play with some tropes. I like to just be like, oh, but what if I put in like some Ursula K. Le Guin themes? Or what if I added some Howard Zinn, like history of the world kind of stuff? And so I think I'm always like messing around with that just to keep myself entertained. But I do think in the end, people describe my work often as weird or gonzo, and I'm not saying they're wrong, but I never try to make it that way. It just ends up coming out that way.
I see, but I mean, what do you mean about weird? Like, how we would define it? It's like something that defies logic, or something that's originated for something outside of our reality, or how do you see the weird and weirdness in the stuff that you like and like in your work? How would define? Oh, I think this is weird in my work because that's the essence
Ah,
of being weird, you know.
yeah. Good question. I think weird is, to the most general definition, is when something you completely weren't expecting happens. There's a story, I think it's called Cat Skin Suit by Kelly Link. It's one of the weirdest stories I've ever read. When you pay attention to media, you see the formula, right? You're like, okay, I can tell this beats here because they're trying to establish that. And I think weird kind of throws that formula away. You just like you're shocked by what happens or how something happens. And if you go too far into weird, you get I mean, I think transgressive is really good, but then you get into like sort of shock where it's just weird. And I think there needs to be some contrast. Like the weird is gonna hit you more powerful. The
For
unexpected
sure,
is
yeah.
gonna hit you if there's something that's sort of normal to set it up. So I think that's the loosest definition for me.
Yeah, like if everything is weird, nothing is, right? So we have to have this
Exactly,
constant,
exactly.
they're like expecting this, that there's something that breaks from that, and then you say, well, that's pretty weird. So cool.
Yes, 100%.
Uh, but I was hoping, as you were telling a little about yourself, to tell a little bit about your fiction work and as an author. Like, I don't know, I mostly know you about your RPG work, and then I went looking for your stuff and found out like you write fiction too, and how does they have like a dialogue between your RPG work and your fiction, or they're completely different things?
Oh yeah. I think they are mostly different things. My first book was I so I got my master's in Roman history, and that was in sort of the early mid 2000s when Zack Snyder's Dawn of the Dead, I think, and 28 Days Later kind of relaunched zombies, and I fell pretty hard into the zombie subgroup, and because I was studying ancient Rome all the time. Just kept thinking maybe ancient Rome versus zombies would be really cool. And so that was my first novel. It took me a couple of years to write it. And then um
How is
I
that
think
not a game yet? Like ancient Rome against
I
zombies.
know
That's
it's a
pretty
kind of a
freaking cool.
natural
Yeah.
fit, right? You think about like chariots with spikes just going through hordes of zombies and also, Romans were a bit more ruthless. Like nowadays, it's like we have like maybe armies quarantining towns, but like Rome would just burn them to the ground. Like we know that. Like they would not mess around. So pretty fun setting. That it took me almost 90 submissions to get a publisher for that, and when they did, they booked me to a 3 book deal. So the second book I wrote for them, they wanted a like a hidden world, like a Jules Verne or Edgar Rice Burroughs, like a world beneath our own. And that's the one where I feel like that was my best-selling book, but that the publisher, rightfully or wrongfully, wanted to undersell the story. They wanted to make it look like an adventure story, and it was pretty weird. I put in like basically every god who ever existed kind of lives there beneath the mantle, and our sort of characters get involved in the intrigue there. So that book gets a lot of really bad reviews, but it's mostly people saying, "Oh, this isn't the story I expected." So I think with Weird, you just want to make sure that you've managed expectations and aren't selling, something that looks different than what it is. And then my third book for them was called Cthulhu Kaiju, which the publisher, they're Australian. He said he'd just seen a beer, like a brew pub called Cthulhu Kaiju, and wanted it to be a novel. So I set it in Portland, or Oregon, I guess, and just have like kind of had fun with like if you go mad fighting Cthulhu, you go mad just seeing Cthulhu. So then the army kind of like gets they find like blind veterans and see if maybe like they can fight against him because they can't see him. So just kind of playing with some of those mythos things as well. So that was the last novel I wrote. The one I'm working on now, I've been working on for almost 10 years, and to the point of like maybe I should just throw it away, but I've been thinking that for like 5 years. I don't think it's the same as role-playing game writing, other than I do always try and draw from diverse actions, diverse just inspirations. But I mean, role-playing game writing is so technical, and it's actually
Yeah.
pretty freeing to write fiction. I'm like, oh, I could just have 2 people talk for a couple pages. That's amazing. This is so this is so easy. Yeah.
But I like how the settings and stories, they all could very well be like great settings, and even sandbox set, as you said, like they're going to the mantle inside the earth, and there's all these gods and intrigues, and you're like in the middle of that, and maybe having to manage factions and alliances, all of this could be like excellent stuff. And some of the stuff I'm like thinking, oh, maybe I should talk to Ahimsa. Maybe we could work on something like the Rome versus Zombies for The Dead Are Coming, like a
Yeah, I
supplement
would
for
love
it.
to do that. I would
That
love
would
that.
be amazing.
I've actually been working on the Beneath the Mantle one, adapting it to Primal Quest as well. So I think it would fit pretty well for that. Yeah.
Yeah, I have a little bit of writing for like a Hollow Earth, a Lost World setting for DCC. Like I wrote some classes and stuff and
Oh,
part of the
cool.
setting, and I thought about that too. Like I like how you say they weren't kind of connected because they're like directly connected, but I think like the inspirations, the things you draw from, and the kind of settings and weirdness, like you draw them from like the same well of inspiration, I guess, right? They're not directed because they're not the same setting and stories, but I think like in their essence are connected. At
That's
least for
probably
me on the
true.
outside,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, I think that's true. I mean, it would be hard to
yeah.
have your things be
It's
entirely
it's your
different.
work,
Yeah.
so
Yeah,
obviously it
yeah, yeah.
draws from the same well. So
Yeah, exactly. That's definitely true.
okay, now for the second question: do
Uh-huh.
you consider yourself weird, or do you consider you weird yourself? I don't know, as a person. Like, do people say, "Oh,
Yeah.
yeah, he's kind of weird"? I don't know.
Yeah, absolutely, people do. Yeah, I do consider myself weird, but it's at least half because, um, do you know, like, what's a good example? Like if you forgot to brush your hair and you notice people kind of like glancing at you because your hair is just bushy and crazy, eventually you start to be like, "There's something weird with me. There's something wrong with me." For in that case, that my unbrushed hair is just my personality. Like eventually I was able to piece together like, "Oh, I'm pretty weird. I guess I'm pretty weird." And I think I've traveled alone a lot, and the more time alone you spend, I think the weirder you get. And I
Yeah,
started off pretty weird anyway. So yeah, and
yeah.
I'm,
People are
yeah,
uncomfortable with people that are comfortable being alone. I think, right? So they think
yeah,
that's weird. Like
yeah,
how do you go to the movies alone? So that's weird, you know?
and that's the easiest thing to do alone. You're sitting in a dark room. Come on.
Yeah,
Uh, yeah, absolutely. So I definitely consider myself weird, and I feel pretty lucky to be weird. Like I like it. It's nice to just be able to have your own thoughts. I'm not somebody who has to be. I don't mean to set up a straw man here, but there's the kind of people who like they want to have their likes pre-approved. So their music they like to take from Pitchfork, or they like to make sure that a movie they watch has a certain threshold on Rotten Tomatoes. And for me, I'm just okay to make up my own opinion. It's wrong. What if a wrong opinion can be wrong? It's fine. I can like trash. That's totally fine. But at least it's my wrong opinion.
yeah. Yeah, I don't know. I kind of think everyone deep inside is weird, but some people are just comfortable being weird. Some people like maybe that's the thing you do. They're like looking for like outside of approval, and that's not their fault. Like we are all are taught that in some way, like, But they're uncomfortable with being weird, so they want to belong to some expectations to be accepted. So yeah.
Yeah, definitely true. It's definitely true. I mean, there's probably a few people who aren't very weird, but in general, we are probably a bit weirder than we try to show. I think that's probably true. Yeah.
Hmm. Uh, just as a curiosity, like, can you share
Mhm.
something weird about you, or like something you do, or something that like you're constantly thinking about? Like it's okay if you're not. Like maybe, for example, I don't know, the way you brush your hair, or like you have some I don't know. I like when I cut my fingernails, I just arrange them to throw them away like in a specific order. Like I have some like the way I read books. Like I have to read the book. I read the credits. I read the introduction and then the thank you note in the end. And it's hard for me to skip some parts.
Yeah, I'm similar with books. I very rarely won't finish a book, and I do try and read the whole thing. I've been told I have a very weird walk, or so I might walk very weirdly as well. Uh, I've gotten to the point I notice now where, like, without thinking about it, I have like a monologue with myself a lot of the time. So I'll just be out in public and I'll just be like, that wasn't a very good idea. Like it's my thoughts just come out like vocally, which is unfortunate, but it's just kind of something
Yeah,
I've noticed. Yeah.
yeah, yes. I think we all, most people have like conversation with this stuff. I heard some people don't, and for me that's like, really? How do you organize your thoughts?
Yeah,
I
I
don't
think
know.
it's fine when they're thoughts, but it's when you just say them out loud is when it gets a little bit a little dicier. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, they're like overflowing, I guess.
Yeah, that's
Uh,
right.
and now I think about RPGs. Like, do you do you think RPGs is something like weird as itself, or like the habit of the performance of playing a role playing game? You know, and if so, how so?
I would say I think that role-playing games actually aren't weird. I'd say a big part of their success is because they tap into our sort of like our sense of play and our creativity. And in a lot of modern society, traditionally those outlets are pretty stifled.
Yeah,
And especially, your middle class, your parents aren't saying like, hey, you should tell stories. They're saying, hey, you should be a dentist or a banker or whatever. And I don't want to see you drawing pictures. I don't want to see you telling those elf stories. And I think that's why D&D, which was kind of subversive in its time, was this like, here's the way that we can tell stories, and we can, it's that innate desire that children have to play house or play doctor or play cops and robbers. It's that we've just kind of codified it a little bit more. So I think I would argue that it's sort of an innately natural thing. Now some of the accompanying rituals that have developed probably are a little bit weird, but I'd say the act itself really is kind of a primal thing that we need.
yeah, for sure. Like in storytelling, it's how society would transmit knowledge for like a really long time. Uh, but as you said, like as our society is nowadays, or even back then when it started, like this is weird for these people. Like my parents wouldn't understand what the hell we are doing. Like even like teachers in my art school and graphic design, which I would assume would be familiar, that maybe they don't play, but they know it's different than writing a book. And I had a teacher that was an author who said, I don't understand role playing games. Why don't you just write a book? That's 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 the main thing. It's not like a book. You don't know the story. Like you're just playing and finding out. And I know for me that's weird. Like we are telling a story, but we're telling a story together. Nobody knows what's going to happen. At least ideally, I mean, the kind of game I like, it's like more sandbox, and so there isn't like a fixed path. And even for like storytelling, for me, that's pretty different from any other kind of storytelling I know, right? Like in movies, in fiction, in comics, uh, there's maybe different authors, but they when you start reading, you already know where the ending is already there. But as you start planning, you don't know what's going to happen. And even if you play the same game, the same adventure, and even maybe with the same group, if they exchange characters, they make, I don't know, it will help it differently. Even maybe with the same characters making the same choices because of ways of random things that happen, or uh, it can go the other way. So for me, that's pretty fascinating, and kind of makes me think that it's weird in this way. But yeah,
Yeah,
as
no,
a essence, yeah,
I think you make a really good point, but I would still just argue, like, the old saying that if you have healthy boundaries in a toxic relationship, you're often painted as the problem, and I think that's D&D.
Yeah.
It's not the problem, it's just society is
Yeah,
skewed so far
for
away
sure.
from
Yeah.
creativity, so it does look weird to standard people for sure, but I think it's not. It's just that society is well, it's broken
Yeah.
in a lot of ways, and this is one way. And the other thing that I think what you're saying
Yeah,
is so
our
interesting.
society is weird, Brian. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's what it is. It shouldn't be weird to have collaborative, creative time with
Yeah.
like-minded people. Like that should be an innate part of most societies. And like you said, that goes to Homer, or that goes back to folklore, and that
That's so
like that's
true.
an
Yeah.
ancient tradition. The other thing, what I like about role-playing games, and why I'm not one reason why I'm not into sort of actual plays or like codifying an adventure, because then you're bringing in story tropes, you're bringing in character development, you're bringing in plot, you're bringing in all those things which I love in a novel, but I don't think that a role-playing game needs the same structure. Like I like that it's a little more picaresque and a little more like, look like Jack Vance. Like, yeah, Kugel never learns. He's not on it. He doesn't have a character arc. He's not. He doesn't want to reconnect with his father. I don't need those things in my role playing game. I think the characters are as much a conduit to the vast, wild, weird lands and settings. And so I don't think the emphasis needs to be on characters or growth. I think they're just part of the process, and that's where it's going to differ a lot from fiction for me.
Yeah, that's true. Although there are some RPGs that focus more on character development and relationships, but yeah, like the ones we usually play, like the old school NSR games, are more like exploration and discovering the setting and then factions and NPCs and seeing how they can affect these, right? So are you working on any new RPG thing that you want to talk about, and what are stealing weirdness in it?
Yeah, I could mention a couple things. One, my co-companion, my co-collaborator, Wind Lothamer, he wrote a book called The Vanilla Adventure a few years ago, and we're doing a second version of it where I'm adding basically twice as much stuff to it. We're making that, like, we want it to kind of be one of the go-to beginner
Wow.
adventures. I'm also going to be publishing a book by my friend Gord Seller, who is more of a fiction writer. He has one role-playing game book called Isle of Joy, and it's kind of Shakespearean. It's pretty dark. It's pretty dark. I really love it, but it might be the first thing that has like a content warning. And personally, I have a few projects I've been working on, but the one I haven't announced this yet, but I'll tell you, I'm working on something for Cairn. I know that Cairn has a new edition coming out, and I have some artist friends in Austria, and we're making a module called Janky Goblins. And the idea is that basically a wizard created a tower full of treasure and left goblins to guard it. And then the wizard disappeared, and the goblins, after a while, started saying, "Why don't we just open these treasure chests and use what's in them?" So you're fighting like they're not strong goblins, but they have crazy powerful artifacts. And as you defeat them, you kind of acquire them and can go up further into the tower.
Nice. Yeah, that's finally some goblins that make sense and use the stuff they're like guarding, like just looking at the chest and saying, "Oh, I wonder what's inside," right?
Right? It occurred to me one day, like, why wouldn't you just open that chest? But
That's
like,
great. That's
yeah,
great. Like these funny and creatures that you usually just mow through, and now they have this awesome like winds of fireballs and things like that. So
exactly. That's exactly, yeah, exactly right.
that's cool. Yeah. Uh, what would you say is like the weirdest thing you created, like for either for your stories or like your games?
I think it's the first real book that we wrote was called The Chaos Gods Come to Meatlandia, and I wrote a D100 like chaos table, which I thought was quite fun. And then I brought it into my own game, and I was like, "Oh, this is messed up. Like this is it's great. It's fine for a one shot, but you cannot play it for a campaign because all
Yeah.
of a sudden everyone is a panda or whatever. Like it's pretty weird. Like I found it was too weird for me to use.
Yeah, yeah. Maybe something that's using like just sporadically, like you roll like there's this 1% chance when this stuff happens. And
Yeah, yeah, or a time limit because most of that was permanent
oh yeah,
stuff as well. Yeah.
yeah, or something not so not so hard way to get rid of it, but then I don't know. Yeah, weird is a hard balance, right? It has to be weird, but it has to be so frequent, but it has to happen because otherwise, what's the point, right?
Yeah,
Great, yeah,
exactly. Yeah, it's a slippery, careful balance you gotta
yeah.
walk with trying to do a weird walk.
Instead of game balance, like weird balance, you have to work for a weird
Exactly.
balance there.
Game imbalance, right? Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure. Yeah.
uh, what's the weirdest role playing game you ever played, or either like the weirdest like session or adventure?
Oh, um, well, I think I have to give a shout out to Riffs, which is just always gonna be weird. And I think is like low key one of my influences. I'm sort of trying to emulate the fun weird you get from Riffs in old school gaming. But for a single session, the first one that comes to mind that in case it's just unexpected, in the Chaos Gods to come to Meatlandia, I wrote a class called the Chaos DJ, and the Chaos DJ selects 3 actual songs before the session, and they can play them during the session and have those effects happen. So if you played what a Highway to Hell, then you could create a Highway to Hell. Um,
Cool.
and one of the playtesters, I think they picked their songs at random. They just like opened whatever iTunes and the first 3
Yeah,
songs. And there was some enemy, like they got ambushed by like it was a wandering monster table, and I was like, this is it. They're dead. There's no way. And they played a Katy Perry song and just like turned it into a dance party. And I was just like, I'm not even mad. I did not see that
that's
coming.
pretty awesome. That's pretty awesome. That's a pretty awesome magic system too, right?
Yeah.
That's pretty awesome. I really like that. That's a great magic system, like for a modern weird game.
It's pretty powerful, and it just lets you riff. If you just wanna be creative at the table, it's a really good way to
Yeah,
just be like, "Cool, I'm gonna" it's like a bit of improv, which I enjoy.
yeah, that's fantastic. Uh, what are like weird things you experience later, or like weird something weird like you watched or read that has influenced you, or maybe like you think about like something happened to you or something you read, a TV show or a movie or comics or whatever.
There is on YouTube, there's this video I watch every couple years. It's about these 2 twins in England, these 2 women, and they met up, and a lot of this got captured, and the things that happened to them, it's like we're watching I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but you watch this and you know that there's some truth that we don't understand behind it. The things that they do, they run out into the streets, they get hit by cars, but they kind of take these hits. One of them goes to the hospital and like drags herself out of the hospital and kills somebody. It's hard to like give this like it's hard to do it justice. It's like this half-hour thing that mostly uses actual footage of the women, and it's like, are if you told me they're aliens, I'd be like, I don't believe in aliens, but yeah, you're right. Like, you know what I
Wow,
mean? Like,
what's the name
it
of
is.
that?
I'm gonna what is
uh
it called? It's
yeah,
yeah,
we can like find out later, and I'll
yeah.
put on the show notes. That sounds pretty cool. Yeah.
A lot of the comments say that they think it has something to do with MK Ultra, perhaps. Who knows? Who knows exactly what it is? Shared Psychosis. Their names were, if you want to check it out, their names were Ursula Erickson, and I think her sister's name was Sabina. I guess Sabina Erickson. Yeah, Ursula Erickson and Sabina Erickson. And their story is, yeah, it's so weird. It is.
Wow.
So that's a weird one for sure. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah. Would you try using some of that to inspire something for a game or like monster or like a pair of, I don't
Definitely.
know,
Yeah.
assassins? I don't know,
Yeah.
weird.
Yeah. Oh, another thing, it's a podcast called The Polybius Report, and I don't want to spoil it, but it's set in the 80s in Portland, and well, I guess I'll spoil it a little bit. It's fictional, but it doesn't come off as fictional. So a huge part of the fun is like it's so plausible, and then one thing happens and you're like, wait, is this real? And so I link these two things. Like at some point I definitely want to make a game that you could just lean into all this weird stuff. There are some
Yeah.
games like that already, but the urge to tinker is real. So I do think I think when you're writing, you tune your brain into a frequency where every bit of
Yeah.
information you get is like, oh, that'll work. Oh, that'll work. Oh, that'll work.
I'll mix it up. Yeah.
Yeah. So definitely those twins would be amazing assassins. But I think the horror is like they were just married women and something triggered them. And they lived in different countries. They were sisters, but they met up and then went on this, who knows? And I think the what triggered them is the interesting part for me. So I would explore
Yeah.
that,
Yeah.
like, for sure. I think that could be really interesting. Imagine in your fantasy adventure game if you got attacked by like two villager moms. You'd be like, what is happening? That's so weird. Why did that happen? Like that's a good hook already. You're kind of like, first of all,
Yeah. Yeah.
you don't want to kill them, but they're trying to kill you, and so you subdue them, and then maybe two more moms come after you, and now you have to figure out like what is happening with all these villager moms. Like that
Wow.
could be a fun adventure.
A horror adventure. Yeah.
Oh yeah,
Uh,
of course.
do you believe in something like that would be weird, like anything related to religion, spirituality, aliens, conspiracies, or anything else like that it
Yeah.
isn't like explainable? Like, do you believe in something unexplainable? And
Yeah, I think the most esoteric thing that I low key believe in is collective consciousness. It does seem to me like there's some sort of soup that we all have a mental spoon in, I would guess would be that I can't improve it. If you told me it
yeah,
didn't exist,
yeah, yeah, yeah. Of course,
I
yeah,
would be upset. But that's the one that like at least my confirmation bias, I see a lot of things that I think, yeah, yeah, that could be. So that's probably one of the weirder things I believe in.
yeah. I've experienced something that kind of make me lean in that way, and I hear a lot about this from people that I really like. I like to hear about like philosophy and thoughts and the way they see the world. But yeah, I'm kind of skeptical from nature, but it's one of the things that makes some sense, and for some reason I took mushrooms once, and I felt this connection like to everyone, and it was really weird and really good at the same time. But I don't know, right? It's just my mind, and anyway, but yeah,
Right, right, right. But yeah, that's how we are, our minds, right? So I
yeah,
mean, what are you gonna do?
yeah, or yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I kind of think we're like a combination of the two, and for just one thing, like it gets too ethereal, and I don't like to
That's
be
a good
like
point.
just
No,
my
that's a good
mind.
point.
I don't know.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah. Uh, and thinking about that, like, what weird thing, you wish was real, like, or
Ah,
like if one weird thing, like you
uh-huh.
read about, or you know, you wish it was real, and we could find about a bit more, and
This might be a bit of a cheat answer, but I wish cryptids were real. It would be really, really cool if you could like really see Yetis or Jersey Devils or these sort of because it's not implausible. Things like them exist. Most of them. I mean, I guess by the time you get to like the Mothman, it's kind of magical. But a lot of these cryptids could just be beasts.
Yeah,
I'm always fascinated by. They're sort of like that point between folklore and charismatic megafauna. It's
yeah, yeah,
like I like
yeah.
both those things a lot. So you combine them, and I would love for that to be real.
That's true. Yeah, like we find some lost world space, like in the middle of the Amazon or like in some island, and we find some
Exactly, exactly.
uh creatures that weren't supposed to be alive still. That would be, yeah, interesting.
I know that they found on, I think on Papua New Guinea, a valley that humans had never been before, and the animals hadn't evolved to fear humans, so they would just like walk up and jump in their hands, like they didn't know. So there's got to be more pockets kind of like that. You would think. I mean, I know we've explored the world pretty well, but
Yeah,
there's still a bit of unknown
yeah, like underwater, like we don't know
for
pretty much
sure.
anything. Like
Yeah,
if
that's definitely
Atlantis was real, like we have no freaking idea. Yeah.
yeah. Once you get into like the deep sea, the abyssal plane, it's outer space. Like
Yeah,
it's
yeah, it's exactly like outer space. That's
uh,
pretty cool. Yeah. So yeah, that's where like some questions I would like to talk about and then explore what kind of influence you feel with the weirdness and how you feel the weirdness in your work and around you. And I think we had some pretty good talks, and I really like the idea of the music as like a spell system and maybe work different ways to work that and gamify that. That's really inspiring. And how your like literary work like draws like from the same essence but haven't been sported in gaming, and some of these ideas like could really make something really interesting, and I would like to see that someday, but I know you have like a lot of your plate and working on a lot of stuff, and I'm really glad you came here to talk with me about this, about yourself. And in Ahimsa, if people want to reach you, how can they reach you and see more about your work as RPG game designer and as a literary author to know about these stories? And I'm really curious about the Hollow Earth one with the gods, and I want to check that out myself too.
cool. Well, thanks for having me. I love this conversation. If you wanted to check out more of my stuff, I am on Twitter still, Ahimsa Kerp.
Still.
I know. I feel like it might not be forever. My role-playing game stuff you can find either at drive-thru or on the website nightowlpublishing.com. You could buy all the physical stuff there. If you go to Amazon and type in my name, Ahimsa Kerp, all of my novels show up there. I have some short story collections as well. Yeah, I mean, if you Google my name, you'll find everything that you could possibly want.
Cool. I didn't know they were on Amazon. Yeah, I will check out that one. And thank you so much for being here. And everyone, weirdos, thanks for listening. And see you next time on Weird Games and Weirder People.
Keep it weird.
Thank you for listening to Weird Games and Weirder People. If you enjoyed the show, please consider supporting us at ko-fi.com/WGWP. See you next time, and remember, weird is the new wonderful.